So we're probably going to just play through on this video and not just do a 10-minute end of turn, or more likely 3-minute end of turn, but it's hard to tell because we got weird shit going on here. So now the French chit was drawn next, and that means I've got like 2 French units to move. These guys that I'm transferring over to give me some more defense over there, because I'm really worried about the way the Alliance is able to throw some significant force in that direction. I don't think it's enough to hold, but we'll see. And then these guys over here. Now, these guys are the complicated thing. What's up with them? Well, first of all, I'm not going to be able to recover because I fought this round. I'm not sure how to keep track of that normally. Just like I wouldn't be sure how to keep track of it if it was end of turn. I know right now, but I could see that getting lost. But here's the more tricky thing. These guys are plus grand disorder. I need a leader to rally them. My leader's over here. Now maybe I can find someone that I can send. But my cav leader's over here. I need him there because he's required for me to maintain this artillery and cav together. I can't have them at the same time. I'm going to fire some artillery. I could charge, or I guess otherwise melee, and I may... Boop, boop, boop. Why is there no... There it is. I should put these up top. But I'm not sure the odds are terribly good for a melee here. Without the charge bonus of doubling, I may just be asking for damage. So what we may end up seeing is everything kind of locked here, because I'm not really sure I can get out of it. I'm going to look at the rules and see, but it strikes me that if I try to disengage, I'm going to get reaction charged. That's not something I want to have happen. This is the price I paid for looking at 2 rule sets. The regs required a leader for morale recovery. As far as I can see, the only requirement here is to be outside, not adjacent to an enemy unit. This is not in the morale rules, this plus grand disorder. It's under the involuntary formations. Unfortunately, the morale rules is where I would have thought to look for recovery of morale, but nah, I mean, it's not terrible. Everything should be consolidated in the morale rules. But anyway, I'm going to jump back over to the Allied side, and it looks like we have something I don't expect down here. What's... Oh, that little flag. I don't know what that is. Probably light cav or something like that. Things are not well explained, so... Alright. So he failed. So now if he's not 15 hexes away... He's not. He pulls back, but he can stop here in the town. Yeah. Which is cool. And then this guy over here, over on the French side, makes a check. 33 is probably good enough for him to get up to good morale. Yeah. So he's now regular morale, and we'll form him up in column. I flip over the columns. You're not supposed to do that, and that causes some problems because in some cases flipped units, for example trailers and stuff like that, are supposed to be flipped. But honestly, I need the distinguishment between line and column more than I need other things. We'll figure out when I get into other situations. You know, for example, do I want to deploy these as skirmishers or as regulars? I really don't fucking know. So far, you know, since they're the only force there, it's kind of tough to make that decision. Plus, it's kind of hard to tell what's a skirmisher and what's not. I think the little horn or whatever helps for the French, but I don't know. You know, the Allies have different symbols on them, which may mean different things. Let's see. What do we have on these guys? We have this little weird bucket thing. And these guys do have a range on them, so presumably they are all skirmisher quality, or stuff that I can break into skirmishers if I so desire. I'm used to wanting to drop everything to skirmishers, but like that you possibly can, at least from the NBS series, which is that you break off all your skirmishers and send them forward. Here it's a little harder to tell because I have to break an actual unit into a skirmisher, make it an actual skirmisher for the fight, and that's a somewhat more difficult decision to make. Right now, they didn't have time. They need to deploy in line to protect the units in front of them. All right. Well, I also pulled a leader chit. I don't have any allied leaders I need to move, and this is why I looked it up. I wanted to see, hey, do I need to move the French leader? And the answer is, yeah, I don't have any that I can really spare. I could pull some off of the line, I guess, but they're all doing something. So there's a lot of allied leaders kicking around. There are not a lot of French leaders kicking around yet. I noticed I forgot to mention something early in the turn, or at the end of last turn. I probably should have done the morale level determinant. I'm not sure if that's supposed to be done at the end of the first turn of the hour or at the end of the last turn of the hour. I'm probably going to do it at the end of the last turn of the hour. It really doesn't matter as long as you're consistent. Anyway, I've played through the rest of this 20-minute turn. There is no morale adjustment for either of these. There just haven't been enough losses. That's going to only happen when you have unit losses. Do casualties cause morale checks in melee? Uh-oh. Let me look that up. No, they do not. And it makes sense because the chart causes morale effects and some morale checks. I believe. I don't remember where the morale checks are. Are they the asterisks? Yeah, they're the asterisks. And we did not have one of them. Okay. Although, we may have had one over in one of these. But we didn't actually have that morale effect. Or if we did, it was the cav bounce or something like that. Okay. So it's time to move on to the 720. And like I said, I'm not going to cut this video and say, oh, look, we have an 8-minute video at the end of the turn. So, you know, it'll just have a hard time finding the starting point and end points of turns. And if you got a complaint, write to YouTube. It's not my problem. They're the ones who aren't letting me, you know, have a little bit more leeway. I want an hour and a little bit. But, you know, the reason is that I target for an hour. I really do. And it's easy for me to see an hour. It's not easy for me to see 50 minutes. Right, the chit choices were made. In a couple of cases, I withdrew the road column, administrative march, whatever, order because I want more flexibility. So these guys, I want to be able to deploy them to start moving that way, as well as dispatch somebody off this way. I don't feel like my little administrative march really reflected that, and the Allies have so many extra commands available here, especially since I had a couple of units under administrative. Same thing here. I moved this out of administrative. I'm not sure I need these. I'm not really sure what I'm going to do, but it's the only place fighting's happening, so it seemed pretty important, although we're going to have stuff kind of come up under there. And given that, I'm wondering if the French want to throw a command down to whatever is in charge up there. It's very hard to define the formations here, largely because of the counter representation work. You know, I mean, when I got stuff like this that's all under one command, and this stuff that looks similar isn't, it's the belt that you have to go by. But you also have to go by, okay, does the leader put these units in command? And that's going to get, you know, if this command down here, which stretches to here by the belt, if that starts getting disrupted a little bit, there might be endpoints of that command which will no longer be in command, simply because right now they're only that way because that's a contiguous line. I know it doesn't look it, but you'll see I'm sitting in the middle of hexes. Those units are covering 2 hexes each. You could use extended line markers. Somebody suggested that. Those are intended for cavalry, and in a way, they help distinguish the differential. I could see using them, but I'm going to try to play it by the suggested format just because I think, first of all, if I ever play with other people, but that's very unlikely, I won't be violating the rules, you know, in terms of how the game should be presented. And secondly, I don't know. I don't have a good argument. There's only a limited number of those counters, and I really do need them. The cav needs to be able to extend out further than the infantry does. So I'd have to pull counters from another game, which I could do. This guy probably should have done it last turn. He dropped a admin march out to here. Now this is interesting. This here, Weiserts, I can't pronounce those S's, double S's that look like B's. This is a particularly heavy stream, and the river is impassable. But the stream becomes impassable after today. Actually, it's impassable on every scenario, on every day except the 26th. I doubt that it's actually impassable on the 25th, but it's not on the map on the one scenario that covers the 25th, which is just some tiny thing over there. But right now it's heavy enough that I think it takes your full movement to cross. So it's not really something that I particularly want to cross. And you might say, wow, you're kind of dividing your forces. And that division of that stream is really important in the actual battle, the historical battle. However, I do need to get some leverage from this, from the front against that unit. And this is the only command that I have available to sort of slide into place at this point. These guys are kind of positioned forward on that side, so I'm planning when they come in to send them on that side along with what's going on over here. And whatever the cav mess is, I can't really make heads or tails out of it. Hopefully I'll learn a little bit more about whether what I'm doing is reasonable, and also, you know, whether I have any answers on trying to fix it. No other new units coming in right now. We've got some stuff. I think everything's coming in after like 9 a.m. at this point. All right. I saw this. I found where they hide it here in a sides maneuver segment. They go through all the things that you do when you draw a chit, and at the end of it, active side then resolves the declared assaults and resulting melees. Upon completion of this, the active player removes his charge markers and reorganizes his disordered and PGD units. Doesn't say anything about fatigue, but if we look over here, those are in the same segment. Now, I don't think that quite works for various reasons that I tried to elucidate, but I don't know if I was successful with. And then they go, players then resume drawing chits from the cup. Right now, I'm actually looking that wasn't what I was looking for. I was looking for some other rule. Oh yeah, because I just drew this regroup chit. Now, this force defined over here doesn't include this unit, and I'm trying to figure out if I can rally or recover fatigue from it or anything. He's rallied actually, but he may be fatigued, or he may remain fatigued. The problem with that has to do, and this is really where the key with this whole thing is, the whole idea that you couldn't have done anything in the turn. Well, if you read that strictly and take this into account as part of your chit draw, which it appears it has to be from the rule I just read, I guess if you're reading it strictly, nobody's made an attack this turn. So if he was in command, or if he's allowed to recover during this chit, it'll be taken care of now. I'm not sure that the rules are going to be so specific as to actually clarify the point of whether or not they can do recovery actions outside of a action chit. I'll let them do it if there's nothing specific either way, which is what I suspect. But clearly he hasn't been a full turn since the attack, and that would make for some interesting things. So whoever goes first in a turn, say the Austrians go first, they can recover their fatigue, and at the same time some other units maybe could hit some of those French units and make sure that they can't recover fatigue. Of course, those French units kind of can't anyway because they're adjacent to the enemy, and you can't do that under those circumstances. They're kind of locked in sitting down and staring at each other from what I can tell from the rolls, which is certainly not what seems reasonable. Okay, so the Allies got the next chit, and successful rally down here. It doesn't seem to require much to do a rally in this version of the rolls as opposed to others. Again, maybe I'm missing something. We got Mesko's division moving up. Now, I've already pushed one of the units that has to go off the map. One of these cav units has to leave. I'm not quite sure what to do with them once they leave, because they might be used in another scenario. They might come back. So I can't put them on the chart because they become casualties if they're on there. Yeah, what about all the stuff that's there? Yeah, I know. I have no idea how to cope with the chart, because that's where you put their losses. And upside down means something else, at least in a few cases for me, because there's some units that are repeated. So these units are replacements for things that I think are in the Dresden garrison. Yeah, and gosh, I can probably use, some kind of chit or something over them to indicate that they're actually dead rather than wounded. But what it means is I can't use this chart to easily ascertain what units are lost. I mean, I can put pieces so that I can understand they're lost, like invert them, this way. So I got the upside down the other way. But there's no real fast, oh yeah, I can count, how many units, where I have to worry about lost units. Really, I think what you need is a separate set of these charts to track the losses the way they actually have them handled. I don't know. Either that, or it's just going to be yet another mechanical burden that this game seems to love to provide. All right, what else? These guys starting on their long walk. The Cav not doing anything, although this guy recovered completely, which means he's ready for another charge next turn. And unless the French can do something, which I can't really figure out what they can do. I mean, they can back away. They can turn and kind of get out of there, I guess. But not this guy, and that's where the artillery is. So the French Cav is going to get kind of pieced if I'm not careful now. I do have this unit as a replacement, and if I pull the leader back, he can probably command everything, and we'll see how that turns out. But this isn't really feeling like a wheeling Cav battle. It feels like the Cav hit, and now they're sitting down and having lunch or something. I never like when stuff like that happens, and I don't know. I may be missing something. All right, over here we're seeing some excitement. Prussians beginning to form up here. And then here we got the Russian skirmishers lining up. Now they're kind of cool because they can turn into real units, and there's some real units to stiffen behind them for an assault, but I'm not ready for the assault yet. I've still got this column coming into play. This one's not yet deployed. So what do? Well, I move forward in skirmish order. The enemy's not in skirmish order, and I start plinking at them. And because there's no chit given to these guys, I used the chit to make sure the cav got to move. It means that there's not going to be fire unless I shoot at the hexes that have the artillery in them. The artillery will shoot back, but it'll absolutely ignore those skirmishers as long as they're just shooting other people. Again, a little weird. Not what I consider a reasonable circumstance. I would have to say I think that artillery should be allowed to fire, but I'm going to stick to the rules on this. If you don't allocate a command, you don't get to conduct offensive operations with something. And that includes, what seems like defensive fire to me. Maybe they have a longer opportunity zone than I'm giving them credit for. But as long as nobody spent any movement points doing anything, even if their opportunity zone goes out to 2 hexes, which I don't think it does, I think it's just the hex adjacent, they're just going to ignore them. Watch their comrades die. Yeah. And I guess that's about it. I haven't rolled for the skirmishers yet. I have to look up. I think they're thirded here in terms of their firepower. But we've seen firepower attacks and how they're calculated. It's not going to be any different. It's just the numbers are going to be much smaller. Some of these shots isn't very good. So I'm trying to avoid the artillery, mainly because that means the rules look up. I actually don't think the artillery can even fire back if the skirmishers shoot at them, because I think it's counter battery fire only. But I'd rather not look up rules. And we do kind of need to mask the fire to get in there. So these guys have a range of 2, so they can hit here. They're halved, not thirded. It's just that there's some units with range 3, but they're also halved. So what I have to do is I have to add for each hex that they cover. So it's 6, 12, 18 really. This is 9 strength points. It's coming against a line in infantry. It's a 9. It was a 1-to-1 attack. Most of them were 1-to-1s. I had I don't know precisely which ones I did, but I had a net effect of 1 hit, made a morale check, and passed it. Now I kind of cheated over here. No big deal. I did the rallying and recovery. The recovery of this unit before I did those fire combats over there. Technically I shouldn't do that, but it's when there's large sections of the map that I can handle a little at a time. I like to do that, even if it means skipping over some phases. That if I was playing it, say, with 6 people here, real people, we'd probably have a couple people here, a couple people here, a couple people here, and things would be happening simultaneously. That's one big advantage of this kind of chit pull. It's not like, oh, Joe, you get to move your unit, and now you're going to get to wait for the rest of the turn, before you get to do anything else. The more people you have, the quicker this is going to actually play out, which is kind of nice. The 10 minutes, though, man, I don't think so. I don't think you can do the movement in 10 minutes with one person without rushing a little bit. I would say if you've got one person per side, for this game to aim for like 20 minutes probably, just to make sure that, especially with newer players, I'm probably cutting that 10 minutes pretty close, even though I'm not looking up much in the way of rolls. But, you gotta look at the charts to see the movement costs sometimes and stuff like that. So anyway, one factor I really don't like about that 10-minute move rule, there's opportunity fire and reaction charges and stuff like that. So your opponent could eat up your time on the clock. Obviously you'd have to pause the clock or something during that. Otherwise, your maneuvers are going to get charged, and you're not going to be allowed to move all your pieces because your opponent takes 5 minutes to figure out if he wants to make an opportunity charge or something like that. Or he drops a die and has to reach under the table. Yeah, I mean, it's just, I think it's a silly rule, to tell you the truth. I think it's more, it should be used more as a guideline. The artillery chit came up, and in this case we have situations where, first of all, I thought there would be fire from here, but there's not. They're too far apart. I'm in range of the artillery, but I'm not in line of sight with the mist that's raining down. It's 8 hexes now, but this guy is able to get a line on him, just kind of skimming by. These guys are deployed over those 2 hexes, but I got a trace there. I hope I did. Anyway, I rolled some dice, and there was no effect, so we're okay there. What I'm not going to get is, as I pointed out, I'm not going to get an opportunity to shoot at those skirmishers because I don't have a chit over there. It's kind of a pain. I ought to put one over there because this guy's got a 5 and 6 chance of getting an activation for free. On the French side of things, we have Borelli. He's the guy who's kind of in 2 places at once. Well, I've gotten him here, which means he can run up and try to grab these units if he wants. I don't know. He's sort of my only aide-de-camp, so he's the guy who came from the windmill. He's made it to his location, so that's cool. But the next part of that shit is the cav here, and now the French have a somewhat of an advantage, which is that the Allied units are exhausted, and the French units are only tired, which means they have a better multiplier. So I think I'm going to launch regular melees here with them. It's not really what you want to do with cav, but I don't know what else to do in this circumstance. And of course, then there's going to be follow-up attacks. This guy, he's got a little moved marker because he moved out of his command from the rejoin your organization shit. I got to make sure to slip my general out so that he can command that next turn. I'm going to kind of wing this. It's not your cav charge. So let's see. We got, why are these guys not? What's the fire melee? So the offensive fire happens first. So the artillery is going to fire first, and I'll just take care of that. But after that, what happens? I think I can do this. Let me think. I don't think there's anything that prevents me from wheeling like that. Except that it exposes my flank, but I'm hoping to be able to push into there. After the movement, then I do the artillery. Ooh, this unit's actually in 3 hexes. I don't think I can do that. Alright. We need to mark this with assault markers. Here, and that's going to be both those hexes. And here running into there. But, and that's the movement. Except I need him within 1, 2, 3 of both. Let's get him back here. Okay. I could be in trouble if those guys advance, but we'll see. After the artillery fires, those guys are going to have to make a morale check to go in, because this is just a normal assault that they're making. And then the defender gets to make a morale check to defend. Since they're not in skirmisher formation, I don't believe they get a fire. What the fire would be is not necessarily, massed fire. It could be harassment tactics with the cav, etc. Alright. The French didn't go in here. The artillery did nothing. However, they did go in here, and they routed the enemy force. I forgot to roll a stand for him. He might have been pursued instead. He had 26 morale. Let's make sure he stood. He stood. So the results are as they were. So now these guys are exhausted as well. Put this back with the leader because he's kind of defining the formation. And now I'm going to have the opportunity to rally units, but there's nothing that I can do that with because this isn't part of my command, and he's fine anyway. And these guys all did something, so he did a melee, so he can't recover any points from that. So I think we're pretty much done. I got one more chit. I think it's the leader chit. The others don't count. And I don't know. I don't think I have any loose leaders. That guy over there moved already this time, so that's pretty much the end of the turn. Something terrible happened though. Me rolling my dice. Boom, I knocked over all my reinforcements. Oh. Yeah, that'll give me something fun to do for a bit. But as far as I can tell, that's going to be the end of the 720 turn. That gets us to 740. And some more allied units are mobilized after I stack everything back up. Drop the command shits in place. Like I said, there's a new Austrian command that's going to be moving. Give it a administrative march up to here. I don't know if that's legitimate. I think it is. I don't think you have to be in road mark column. I'll check that because if not, that goes in the cup instead, and I just have to get them into road column. French used their command over here for the 43rd Division so that they can maybe do something about those skirmishers. At the very least, they can fire their artillery back. Relied on Dyrol for Pujols. He's in command. Schneller, or whoever down here, he doesn't have a very good initiative, so I spent a command on him. And that's one thing that's coming out here. I had just enough command points to activate everything I want to that's legitimate on the coalition side. What that means is because there's no initiative procedure, etc., for other, for regular units, it's very hard, but not impossible, but very hard to do like a massive coordinated assault in this game. Now, at first I thought it was impossible, but then I realized, look, you could take, your army commander and spend a command point on him, and he could command a fairly large force and launch an assault, and then you could have a similar high-ranking commander. So I think my initial fear, which was you just can't do it, isn't correct. But it is very difficult, which is very cool, because it shouldn't be easy to arrange. And it's especially difficult because you have to figure out, all the layers of command and everything from the chart and from the indecipherable counters. Which, maybe I'm getting more used to, but it definitely is a huge barrier to entry for, the first time you play the game. Even maybe if you know the system, it's going to be a barrier because the design work, etc., you have to familiarize yourself with each game's command structure very, very carefully in a way that most, and again, this is the beauty over functionality thing, most hex and counter type games give you a lot more visual clue as to who's associated with what. Even, I'll tell you this, even games that don't give you that, like if we go far enough back to like Terrible Swift Sword up here or something, this game actually gives you more of a clue with these belts, but because those counters were so simple and the unit designation was printed clearly on them where you can easily see them, not hidden on the back or something like that, it was just easier to find than it is in this massive color. In this case, if you want to try to figure out what unit you have, you basically have to, because the unit designation is scrambled all over the place on these counters, you have to basically flip it over. That's the only place where you can see it even vaguely clearly. And there's so many numbers on the back that that's difficult enough. And then the leaders also. There's nothing on the front at all that helps you decide whose it is, except maybe if they're wearing a belt or something. Like this guy's wearing a belt that goes with that, so you kind of know that that's that. And I mean, honestly, it will become more, looking for those belts will become more of a habit, but it's tough to train yourself to that. All right, I guess we're ready to go. And yeah, I've restructured these guys and moved them over there so that I don't throw dice at them anymore. Up the administrative march, the only mistake I've made, it was correct that these guys can get moving on their own. But the mistake I made is they don't come up with the normal chit, they come up with the reinforcement chit. I don't think that has made much difference. It does make it more difficult for me to deploy the forces, though. So, for example, these guys, they're going to begin their deployment. Since that doesn't happen with the rest of the units, it's not easy to integrate their positioning with those units. That's fine. That's actually probably a design intent, but it makes it harder to try to guess where you need to fill in the gap, what gaps you need to play. I think the net effect of it, which is perfectly reasonable, is it ends up delaying your full deployment until you're ready to not be using administrative march anymore, unless you're really, really clever and can figure out, spatially what you're going to fill, as well as feel safe to do it. And it's that feel safe to do it which is really the issue at play that I think is positive here. Because if I've got a line up here and I open up a gap in it because I got this shit, well, now there's a gap, which is indicative of the difficulty in coordinating new troops coming into the line and all that. And there's something very appealing to that. It's cleared enough, and I've hand-hauled my cannons over a couple of turns close enough that most of them can fire. Now, I could fire on this, but I'd take counter battery fire. I don't think it's worth me expending allied ammunition, which is harder to get back. We did get a successful hit on this. No morale effect. But now I've got some reduced ammo. Now, technically, this happens back in the recovery reorganization type thing. However, in order to prevent myself from forgetting to do it, I am going to roll now, because this is sort of in its own little segment of the world. I haven't taken care of these cav yet, which would also be in their own little segment. On a 5 or a 6, because I'm near some roadways, and I've got a path going back to the depots wherever they are, these recover. And you kind of want to take your ammo hits all on one wagon, if you can. In this case, I can take one on these wagons and the other 2 on this one, just because of the unit organization. So we'll use the blue die for the one with only 1 hit on it. Alright, so we get rid of these 2, and the supply is fine. I don't think ammo supply is going to be too big a deal, and that's why perhaps, from what I understand in some earlier games, it was kind of an optional thing, or maybe just these wagons are an optional thing. I know in the earlier rule book, the Regs 22 that I have, the ammo supply is handled directly on the artillery, and it's not optional at all. And you can use an artillery unit to supply a similar artillery unit. So you can put a mobile unit and use it kind of like a wagon. Instead here they just have these wagons. One side effect of my interpretation, and again I don't know if this is correct or not, of how when the reorganization segment happens, i.e. on a chit, brings forward the, okay, well, these French just got disordered. They can't recover unless they've got a chit assigned to them. Is that good or bad? I generally think that units should be able to recover without being given commands. However, from what I've been able to discern of the rules, it seems like this is how it's supposed to be played. And then, it means that you have to pay some attention to any area. And to some extent, hey, I can't return fire or do anything without the command. So maybe it makes sense that I can't really recover morale without it. But it is a little disturbing. Now, the one exception to that is if I'm out of command, I've made this little, decision, I guess. Again, not clearly spelled out in a way that I can, take a definitive judgment on. When you draw one of those special chits, if it applies to your unit, you can use it. So I had units recovering based on those special chits because they were out of command. Now that seems false, right? I mean, if you're out of command, you shouldn't be better able to recover than a unit that's in command taking fire. So I think I'm going to have to look at the rules and try to see if I've got something screwy going on. Anyway, what we had was some effective fire by some of those Russian skirmishers up there. And kind of moving the Prussians over here so that we can get more of them into the center when they get the administrative movement. I think, I'm not positive, but I think I've got one commander who can take both of these. Again, that's something I'm going to have to figure out next turn, basically. But, yeah. Way of cutting the Gordian knot here is the regroup chit says anything that's not adjacent to an enemy and is out of command can be moved in the regroup phase. Now, it doesn't say that it gets all the other attributes. It doesn't get the attack options, obviously. But giving it the recovery seems to solve this problem for those units. But here they say any unit currently stacked with the leader is considered in command. And that brings an interesting point to mind. Units that aren't assigned to a maneuver unit, I don't think are in command. So actually everything is kind of out of command, right? The only units that can move are ones that are assigned to a maneuver unit that they're out of range of. The others are going to be static, but I think they can still do this kind of recovery type thing. So that'll give this guy a chance to recover his disorder. That's my reading of it. But, I feel like, reading these rules and trying to parse together what to use is like reading some of the denser philosophy books and trying to figure out what the hell they actually mean, as opposed to, what it kind of sounds like they mean. It's very, it's not well spelled out in general. Oh, crappies. So I found something I've been doing wrong with these skirmishers. I've been using their printed fire value. It shouldn't be. I thought it was. It is for the cav, I think. Instead, I should be using them as if they're in line. So I don't know what the hell these are. They're Russian. Who knows? Good Lord. What are these things? I don't know what they are. I'll have to look them up on the chart because their unit type is not here. But let's see what we have. NP is not permitted. So I guess there's no muskets and grenadiers. So these are, okay, these have to be Egerskis. because they're the only ones who would fire. So they actually have 2 times the number of increments in the hex. Now that actually works out the same, because they're only allowed 3 increments to fire out of each hex, so I actually got exactly the right fire value somehow. I'm looking up the skirmisher rules to see how they interact and whether or not I want to launch a charge, because I made a command here. At the very least, I'm going to fire my artillery, but maybe I want to do something more. Maybe I want to try to break up this attack. This looks like it's going to be the weaker position, and if I can kind of disrupt this before those guys get into place, maybe I buy myself a little more time. I can't hold this line forever. Whenever that's getting pushed out in the clear, the French are going to have to fall back to the city, but I want to buy some time for my reinforcements to come in, because if I start getting pushed deep into the city, I'm going to have trouble once I have a significant amount of forces. There's a lot of French units over there, and again, we're going to probably not, end on an actual turn here. Let's test out the combat system, right? Okay, so this is going to take a while, and we're probably going to break in the middle of it for a video switch because of a U-turn. So I want to detail in on what's happening during the assault that's happening, because mainly to show what I think the rules say, and that might help people correct me or whatever. So I've sent these guys forward. They're going to target an assault here. They haven't made their pre-morale checks or anything like that. There's no fire yet. You don't get op fire when somebody enters your zone. These tirailleurs got chased away by this. These guys made a morale check so that they could advance in and make an assault on these units. And we're just going to continue down the line as far as whatever this command is, which I think is down to here. I'm probably not going to do all of it. I'm just going to try to punch those Russians back a little bit. I don't want to face those Prussians. They're, formed infantry in a pretty tight line. I've got a weaker force than them. But if I can disrupt this, I think good things happen. So I think this is the extent of what I'm going to do. Do I want to bring this leader along? He gives me a combat bonus. Let's bring him with us. I've declared some assaults. I've chased away some skirmishers. Some of the skirmishers have fallen into general order here. Couldn't chase them. And now we do first the defensive fire and then the offensive fire. And now defensive fire does not require an order. And you don't have to be being assaulted or anything like that. So the artillery, but it's limited to 1 hex. So, you can't do the artillery bombardments and such not using that, which is why this gun hasn't been able to fire, even though there's units in range and everything. It's just not able to. It's going to wait until they're at range 1 to do defensive fire or be under orders. Anyway, we've seen how fire combat works, so I'm going to go with that, and then maybe we'll zoom in. Looks like I'll probably have time to zoom in on the assault. Interesting thing to note, these skirmishers here, they have a greater facing opportunity or facing arc than most units do, so or firing arcs. They're able to fire out their flanks essentially as if they're front hexes. So I'm going to be firing here, and then here. This is general order, which has all around facing. This I think is in clear terrain, hard to see. But these guys are going to be firing up both sides. Each of these assault markers, I have to see if the attacker goes in. So this guy's got a 33 morale. These are not great French troops here. He is going in. That means that I make a defensive check. He's got a 41. These are really lousy Russian troops. And he's going to fail. Now I believe that disorders him away. And we'll take that. Now I think these guys had to retreat. They took a disorder on fire combat. Oops. I'm kind of screwing up because these guys move to contact, so they don't have to make a going in check, but they do have to make a morale check after the defender makes a morale check. Anyway, what we have right now, these guys retreated to fire, but otherwise the French have pushed some of the Russians back, and they've managed to get their rolls on their own pre-morale checks to move forward. Still have this one to do. I'm hitting artillery, jeez. Limbered artillery. Oh, that can't be good. Artillery stands for whatever. That's probably bad. I probably want them running, but... and then the combat values, I believe this has a 3 melee value, and these guys have an 18. So that gets us on the 6-to-1 chart. It's all the way over here. 32. We get a defender disordered now. I think artillery is just destroyed when it gets hit, but that may only be unlimbered. I have to go check that. It's indeed only disordered, only unlimbered artillery that gets destroyed that way. So we're going to disorder them and move into their space. The effect of that assault is somewhat more chaotic than I expected. You know, we have jagged units of French who've pushed through, but other places where they've gotten thrown back. And you're not allowed to reface after an attack, I don't believe. So we're kind of not in the best of position because we've kind of jerked our way in. Now the problem, of course, is if I turn to face well, these guys are in general order, so they're no big deal. But if I turn to face an attack, there's a possibility that other units can then you know, hit my flanks, and that feels a little funky. It's feeling too jagged, and I'm wondering if there's something I'm doing terribly wrong here to cause that. What's left? So I think where we are now is to try to rally the French units. These guys failed their morale check, so from what I can see, they have to rout. Now, the one thing that I have as a problem, somewhere I found a hint that you lose strength points if you move, if involuntary movement, a rout or whatever, or a disorder check, moves you through an enemy zone of influence, or out of, actually. But I'm not finding involuntary movement. Involuntary movement does not trigger a refuted chance as a result of a disorder. I'm not finding it in the involuntary movement section, so I think we're going to have to go back to the regs 22 to see if that has an easier to find, or maybe the rule is actually just not actually present in the Dresde book. This book is just so terrible. Unfortunately, the rules are significantly different in certain areas here. So for example, here, when you try to make a rally roll from disorder, you stay disordered. You don't rout. Here, a failed recovery attempt will see the PGD unit. No, we'll see the PGD unit rout away. Okay. Okay, so I think that unit goes back into disorder. I read this. Let's see. A failed recovery attempt will see the PGD. This is all about PGDs. Oh, we were in disorder. No. A unit that in disorder that fails to recover good morale automatically becomes PGD and conducts rout movement. Whereas, and I've not been, so the unit that routed actually was disordered from enemy fire. It should have retreated off the line. I'm so used to disorder being so mild that it doesn't require a retreat. That's what's causing this weird ragged situation here. And it feels very uncomfortable to me that the line breaks that much, that it, just turns into that kind of a mess. But yeah, so far I have not found I'll keep looking, but I haven't found the rule, a rule that specifically says you lose strength points. So, I mean, the real thing is, are these units I chase away with the close combat, are they subject to losing another strength point from that? And I'm having a hellish time to find them. I really wish somebody would actually write these rules better. I mean, I'm not sure. The regs might be good. I've been pretty good at finding them, but the Dresde rules are just a fucking pile of shit. The references led me pretty quickly to the proper rule here. It includes the original hex that was retreated from. So all those disordered units are going to be taking a hit because they left a zone of influence when they attacked. If you attack from the flank, you're kind of safe, right? Which makes sense. The French side of the turn, or their activation shit, I forgot about Puchol's cavalry, and let me explain what happened. Yeah, it's an A. I'm always unsure if it's Pujol or Pajol or something, but it's Pajol. So what happened was the unit that was back here, and is now rested, well, back here, swung around, performed a charge with the 3 hex bonus, got like 5-to-1 odds on this. Now I found something that I forgot, or didn't know at all, perhaps, which is that the tired units, exhausted units, have their movement allowance decreased even when they're en route. So this guy's actually nowhere near as far back as he is. I'm going to move him up to here. He would not have routed anywhere near as far because these guys were all exhausted, tired, whatever. I'll give him a few hexes back, but he shouldn't have fallen back as far as he did. Anyway, the others, it's livable what happened. So what we had was he slammed into this with like 2 hexes of combat capable units into kind of a flank type position. Because you have more frontage than the other person when you hit the flank, you get more points in your combat, and then in addition there's penalties for exhaustion and everything. So it was just a 5-to-1 charge, plus you get doubled for charging straight forward. So he just slammed into it and drove it out. And then I hand-hauled the guns and tried to create something more like a reasonable line. Of course, my facing is screwed up because of the charge, which opens me up to the possibility of another charge slamming me in the flank and this, that, and the other. Just the nature of how this game can handle things. And this is, I think, if I'm doing this correctly, this is kind of when Richard Berg reviewed this game long ago, or this system. He said it almost but doesn't quite work. And he didn't go too much into the doesn't quite. And this is kind of the place where I feel like the doesn't quite is in place. Now, I feel that doesn't quite work is in place also with the Wellington's Victory type games. Well, there's only a couple of them that have been produced, but they're making more of that series. I felt like they almost got the circumstances, but they zoom in a little too much onto detail and end up kind of screwing things up by doing so. And here it feels like that way with some of the facing situations being stuck. Now that's very much a minis thing. You don't usually get to reface units when minis slam into each other. And honestly, when you're talking about a whirling cavalry battle, I don't think that they'd stay sending their thing off. Anyway, we're at that horrible point where the hour is up, and therefore, again, hey, we stopped mid-turn. Thanks, YouTube. So this is the 7:40